The music's almost hinting, well, it's bad.
Right.
The future is bleak.
Like, wake the up.
Kinda, yeah. It's almost like there's a reality.
Before it's too late, right?
There is a fundamental reality of the world right now. We are heading somewhere.
Yeah.
That who knows what it's gonna be.
I can't take the heat. The sun sends out.
Like when I say I can't take the heat the sun sends out, it's really because, well, I'm overstimulated.
Right.
I'm overwhelmed.
Right.
You know, I want to do this thing, but
everything is too much.
Everything is too much, basically.
Only love can drench me like my ice cold high. But as we drink night, I can feel the painful worry outside.
There's a line I have in it, which is only love can drench with light our ice cold high. And it's kind of referencing, it's meant to reference two things. It's meant to reference, you know, kind of what we do as coping mechanisms, you know, how we find our highs in life. And when I say only love can drench, it means only love can basically make it so you don't need to do that. Or life, you don't necessarily need to become above the reality you're in if things are going forward in the way you want them to or the world needs them to. And then after that, you know, the line is, but as we drink, I can feel the painful worry from outside. And it's like, are we doing enough to solve these problems? Maybe it's okay. Maybe, you know, there's a lot of uncertainty, I think, in that song.
The loneliness also, I think I interpret a lot of like loneliness.
Yeah, there's definitely loneliness. I mean, you're singing about absence in that moment, kind of, you know, being inside, being isolated. And the chorus for me is probably the most profound chorus of mine on the album, which is, we followed that road so slowly.
Right.
And it's take from that what you want to, but it basically means, you know, is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? Where is this choice leading us? Because ultimately it came from the idea that, I mean, honestly, I wrote the song when looking at the news being like, hey, climate scientists are saying we're not doing enough.
Right.
Like, we're going to be screwed.
Right.
And so the idea was like, well, how does that relate to our personal lives? How does that relate to, the greater world? And to me, it's just a lot of anxiety. Changed its form a few times for me. It's even honestly changed its form since this album recording. Not lyrically, but like performance-wise, there's been adjustments and things messing around with it that are different now, but it's kind of, I think in my case, I wouldn't say it's inherently pessimistic or optimistic. It's just uncertain.
Right.
It's anxious.
Right.
And it's, what it is certain about is that, well, maybe there wasn't enough done in the meantime to avoid something potentially awful. But there's also this feeling of, well, maybe we're worrying too much.
It's getting loud, so loud, too loud.
I wanted to make it more personal from a surface level and talk more about personal experience and life and desire and, like, you know, what we do to escape, what we do to pass the time, and maybe what we've been doing that has been distracting us from, or a self, from maybe making the moves we want to make. And regardless, in the end, it's not singing about what the fate is going to be. It doesn't say, oh, well, maybe it'll be fine. It's basically anxiety about, well, where are we heading?
Right.
Are we doing enough?
Right.
And it's kind of, the title So Slowly is just referencing that, well, whatever it is, it's going to come on gradually.
Right.
You know, it's not going to be some moment. It's not going to be some impact. It's going to be lulling yourself, or a transition into the future, or a transition into your future or the world's future.
Unless we get hit by another pandemic.
Unless we
That
get
would be
hit.
Instant.
Yeah.
Our hate will crash. Where our love must outlast.
What do you say to someone who has their whole life ahead of them? I'm not saying that we don't, but you know, someone, let's say, who's in their early teens, and
Oh,
what's
I mean,
what's the message for them? Because certainly I wasn't as aware as far as I can recall, because the problems I had were more personal and problems about acceptance and you know, am I okay with how I look, and
yeah.
am I being accepted for who I am, rather than things that are much greater than yourself.
Yeah. I think it's hard to say anything like all inclusive.
Right.
And I think it's because I actually think a lot of those problems that I also had, and I think a lot of us still have in different capacities,
Right.
they stem a lot from what's happening in the world. You know what I mean? They don't just come from within, I don't think. And so I think like
Right.
the world's anxiety can become your anxiety.
Right.
But like you do have to pick and choose. I think as a teenager or as a kid, it's more important, I think, to choose yourself. You know, to really like, and I think you have more time and freedom to do that.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I think it's really just a question of, I think the song, like I said about ownership, it's taking that ownership away. It's saying that like you can't have full ownership of this situation.
Right.
There are some things we're heading towards which none of us can really control as an individual.
Like wake the up
Kinda, yeah. It's almost like there's a reality.
before it's too late, right?
There is a fundamental reality of the world right now. We
Yeah.
are heading somewhere.
Yeah.
That who knows what it's gonna be. You know, it's just, I think ultimately it's state of unrest. You know what I mean? It's a feeling of unrest, relating it to your personal life. That's thrown in. That's what you have to think about. But ultimately, it's where are we headed?
I think that's why, like on ZFA, thematically, there's that thread of like disruption of wherever you
Yeah.
go. There's always disruption. You know, you're bombarded with all the things that you didn't really ask for, or you
Yeah.
don't really wish for. But then you're sucked into it
Yeah.
because maybe part of the reason is because everybody around you, for example, is addicted, you know, to being on the phones and
Yeah.
getting bombarded with all this stuff. And at what point
I think.
do we say, you know, that's enough, and do we opt out of it, or can we opt out of it?
Yeah, and to what extent are these things just symptoms of a greater problem that's existed for a long time? You know, that is worsening just as a result of quantity.
Right.
As a result of the ability for it to worsen.
And I think that can be seen in every aspect of life,
Yeah.
in the sense that the access to create or broadcast means that there's so much that's being broadcasted, you know, at a given second, that for someone who is absorbing all of it, it can get overwhelming, you know, to a point where it can be anxiety inducing.
Yeah.
And I think that Doomscrolling interlude after the song, I feel like that's
Yeah.
a really
It enforces
Fitting-
the anxiety.
fitting
Yeah.
transition of all of the drawbacks that we are seeing that are arising out of the dark side of the addiction. That's social media addiction, and everybody, you know, feeling like they need to share and overshare, or feeling like, you know, the main character syndrome and all of that. All of these voices and all of these opinions can overwhelm an individual, and, you know, who do you listen to? Do
Yeah.
we still seek things that are external, or
Yeah.
can we shut them off and just go inside and
I think it throws into
Look
question even is the anxiety even warranted? I think it throws that into question. I think, or it can also suggest, well, maybe it's super warranted.
right?
If you don't do this, you
have to handle life as it's
It's the best decision I ever used. Everything I did
kind of a
satisfied.
9-5
have no idea what's coming. You have no idea what's coming.
Part of the message I feel that I've been trying to convey more in my songs is that like slowing down is often the right thing personally. I'm overstimulated. What's gonna happen?
Right.
Are we doing things fast enough? When is this gonna climax? How is it gonna go? You know?
Hopefully before it's too late, but probably not. I distinctly remember the first 15 or so years of life being marked by a memory that feels long enough, but then after a while it just feels like the second half of all the years that I've lived, it just feels like, it doesn't feel like 18 years. It feels
No.
much more condensed than that. And maybe it's because of, how quickly things are changing.
I'm thinking about that a lot more recently, only because next year, 2025, is going to be my 10-year anniversary in August of moving to this city.
Right.
And like being 18. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like I'll be 28.
Right.
And for me, it's like, okay, 10 years. My entire like teen years feels kind of like longer. But that was only 6 years.
Right.
Not like, you know what I mean?
Right,
Like
right.
there's nothing if you really think about it that way. It feels longer, but not because of events, not because of, I think it's just because life was like way more aimless and personal.
Or school kept us busy.
Or maybe, but to be honest, for me, it didn't really. Just to be honest, but I just mean more so like, I don't know, the future for me back then, it didn't exist. It
Right.
wasn't a thing that I considered really.
Right. It was all in the moment.
Yeah, and ultimately, I don't know, there was a lot of change going on in my life personally, constantly out of my control, things I couldn't control. And so for me, it kind of just felt like I was riding a wave and a part of something that was, I don't know.
It's like designed for you. You just had to
Designed
do it.
Designed around me. Yeah, designed around me for sure. And like just existing there. And then suddenly you're on a track and you're driving, you're
Welcome to adulthood.
Yeah. And yeah, time definitely feels different. So I to answer your first, like that old question you just asked is like, is age have something to do with it? Yeah. But I also think, in a lot of ways, I can see feeling worse as a young
Right.
person in this world.
Right.
Even more overwhelmed,
Right.
less able to deal with it.
Right.
But having to put on a harder front, maybe. I don't know. It's meant to be subjective.
Right.
But yeah, climate change. My opinion is not fast enough. We're going too slow
Right.
to make change. Speak for yourselves. The melody in the song is not very optimistic in the outro. It's a little intense.
Right.
It ends on, I guess, an E major, which is fine.
Right.
But ultimately, to me, it feels a little foreboding.
Right.
Screeching, repetitive, just wild and distorted.
Imminent.
Yeah, there's like a doom that's coming. It's just not coming yet. You have to wait.